If you are over 60 and you reheat leftovers every week, there are 3 foods I would not let you put back in that microwave until you hear this. You are not doing anything wrong. You are saving time, saving money, not wasting food you prepared. But the chemistry inside that container does not care about your intentions. And researchers have linked what happens to these 3 specific foods the second time heat touches them to compounds associated with pancreatic and gastrointestinal cancer risk. That is not a scare line. That is what the published science says. I am Dr. Thomas Ellison. 19 years studying diet, aging, and cancer risk in adults over 60. Here is the thing nobody tells you at 60. The most dangerous health risks do not feel dangerous. They feel like an ordinary Tuesday morning. They feel like pressing a button. And the organ at the center of this conversation, the pancreas, will not warn you while the damage builds. It does not hurt. It does not swell. It sends no signal. By the time the first symptom appears, the back pain, the unexplained weight loss, the jaundice, the disease may have been developing for years. Pancreatic cancer has a 5-year survival rate of around 12%. 12%. That is why the kitchen habits that feed this risk deserve a conversation most people never have. Today you will find out exactly which 3 foods have been linked to this risk when reheated repeatedly over time, what happens inside them the second time heat is applied, and the simple changes that reduce your exposure without touching the rest of your diet. No complicated protocol. No dramatic overhaul. 3 specific foods, 3 adjustments. The first one is probably already sitting in your refrigerator right now. Food number 3, processed meat. I want to start here because this is the one most people think they understand, and almost no one actually does. Hot dogs, sausages, bacon, ham, deli cuts. Any meat that has been cured, smoked, or preserved using nitrates and nitrites. Here's the thing most people do not realize. These foods are not starting from a chemically neutral position when you reheat them. The nitrites used as preservatives react with the naturally occurring amines in meat protein during the curing and processing stage. Before the food ever reaches your kitchen, before it is ever cooked once, it already contains measurable concentrations of nitrosamines. Compounds classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as probable human carcinogens, with documented links specifically to pancreatic and gastrointestinal cancer. So when you press that reheat button, you are not starting with a clean slate. You are applying heat to a food that already contains documented carcinogens, and heat accelerates nitrosamine formation. The higher the temperature, the longer the exposure, the more the reaction compounds. Frying or microwaving processed meat at high heat produces a meaningfully higher concentration of nitrosamines than the original food already contained. A 2023 meta-analysis published in Frontiers in Nutrition reviewed studies on red and processed meat and pancreatic cancer risk. The researchers found that prolonged cooking at high temperatures significantly enhances the formation of advanced glycation end products and carcinogenic compounds in processed meat, and that this risk increases with age, specifically concentrating in adults over 60. Think about what that means for a moment. The sausage you are reheating on Tuesday morning is not the same sausage that came out of the pan on Monday night. It has been chemically altered by 1 round of heat. It is sat in a refrigerator where bacterial conversion was quietly continuing, and now you are applying heat again, accelerating a reaction that was never safe to accelerate in the first place. I think about a patient named Gerald, 67 years old, retired firefighter from Nashville. He came to me after a routine check raised some flags. Gerald's diet was not what most people would call poor. He exercised. He watched his portions. But every single morning, he reheated 2 breakfast sausages from the night before. Had done it for years. Decades, really. He told me it saved time and he liked the way they tasted the second day. We talked about the chemistry, not to frighten him, to give him a choice he had never been offered before. He made one change, just one. He stopped reheating them. Gerald told me 3 months later that he could not believe such a small thing had felt so significant once he understood why it mattered. The practical rule is simple. If you eat processed meats, and I am not telling you never to eat them once. Cook them fresh. Never reheat them at high temperature. And if you must warm them, use the lowest possible heat for the shortest possible time. Food. Number 2. Chicken. And this one is going to sit differently than the processed meat, because chicken has been marketed for decades as the lean, healthy protein, the safe alternative, the one you are supposed to choose. And for a fresh, properly cooked piece of chicken, that reputation is not entirely wrong. But what happens to chicken the second time it is heated is a chemistry lesson that most people have never been given. When chicken is cooked the first time at high temperature, grilled, pan-fried, roasted, a class of compounds called heterocyclic amines begins to form. HCAS. These compounds are produced when amino acids and creatine in muscle meat react with heat above 100 degrees Celsius. And they are, according to the National Cancer Institute, directly associated with increased risks of pancreatic cancer in adults who consume them regularly. But here is what the research on reheating specifically reveals. When cooked chicken is reheated, the surface temperature becomes uneven. Certain areas reach temperatures far higher than the rest of the food. In a microwave especially, this unevenness is dramatic. Those hot spots, the darkened edges, the slightly scorched corners you may not even notice, are producing the highest concentrations of heterocyclic amines, compounds that the IARC lists as Group 2A, probably carcinogenic to humans. A study published in Cancer Epidemiology, Biomarkers and Prevention found that HCAs and benzoapyranine from well-done and pan-fried meats were associated with a statistically significant increase in pancreatic cancer risk. And the critical point that most people never hear, reheating does not start the HCA formation from zero. It picks up where the first cook left off. Every additional heat exposure compounds what was already there. I think about Margaret, 72, retired school principal from Charleston. She came to see me because she had read something online that concerned her but could not tell what was credible and what was not. Margaret was meticulous about her diet. Lean proteins, vegetables, very little red meat. But she batch-cooked chicken every Sunday and reheated portions throughout the week, sometimes in a skillet, sometimes in the microwave. She asked me directly, "Is what I read true? Is reheated chicken actually a concern?" I told her the truth, not the alarming version, the accurate one. The risk is not from eating leftover chicken once. The risk is from weekly repeated exposure over years, from the compounding of HCA load with each reheating cycle across a decade or more. For someone over 60 whose cellular repair mechanisms are naturally less efficient, that accumulated exposure carries more weight than it would in a younger person. Margaret's change was straightforward. She still batch cooks, but now she eats it cold, shredded over salads, mixed into dishes that do not require reheating. Cold protein, same nutrition, without the additional HCA generation. The practical rule: if you eat leftover chicken, eat it cold or at room temperature. If you must reheat it, use a low oven temperature, never a skillet, never high microwave power, and do it once only. Never reheat chicken a second time. If you have made it this far, you are already ahead of most people. You now know about 2 foods that millions of Americans reheat every week without ever being told what happens inside the container the second time. But food number 1 is different. It is not something most people associate with a health conversation at all. It is something people reheat casually, automatically, without a second thought, more often than almost any other leftover in an American kitchen. Before I show you what it is, subscribe to this channel. Not because this is entertainment, because the next warning I publish may be the one that matters to someone in your family. And if you are not subscribed, you will not see it. It takes 1 second. And the information ahead is worth staying for. Now, food number 1. And this is the one that will hit the hardest. Because this is not a food most people think twice about reheating. Fried foods. French fries from last night. Onion rings, fried fish, chicken nuggets, leftover fried chicken. Anything that came out of hot oil once and is now sitting in a container in your refrigerator. Most people assume the damage, if there is any, happened during the first fry. Heat the oil, cook the food, that is the chemical event. Reheating it later is just warming it up. That assumption is the problem. Here is what the research tells us. When food is fried in oil for the first time, a process called lipid peroxidation begins. The oil's chemical structure starts to break down under high heat. Oxidized compounds form, including aldehydes, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and in the presence of starchy foods, acrylamide. These are compounds that researchers study specifically because of their association with DNA damage, oxidative stress, and inflammation. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies several of these compounds as probable human carcinogens. Now, when that fried food is reheated, the oxidation process does not start over. It continues from where it left off. The protective qualities of the oil are already gone. The smoke point has already dropped. The surface of the food reaches uneven temperatures, especially in a microwave where hot spots develop that can scorch the food at a microscopic level without any visible browning. Those scorched areas produce the highest concentrations of all three compound classes, and the research is specific on this point. It is not the occasional plate of fries that researchers flag. It is repeated exposure over years. The weekly habit of reheating fried leftovers, compounded across months and decades, that gradually increases the body's cumulative load of these compounds. For adults over 60, whose cellular repair mechanisms are naturally less efficient, that accumulated load carries more consequence than it would in a younger body. I think about a patient named Douglas, 68, retired electrician from outside of Cincinnati, active man, practical, not someone who thought much about food chemistry. Douglas came to see me because his daughter had read something online and wanted him to talk to someone with a clinical background. When I asked about his kitchen habits, he told me he cooked a big batch of fried chicken every Sunday, always made extra, reheated it Monday, sometimes Tuesday, occasionally Wednesday if there was enough left. Had been doing it that way for over 20 years. He said, "I figured it was already cooked. What is the difference?" That is exactly the question. The difference is what the oil has already become by the second heating. And the third, I explained to Douglas that the issue was not the fried chicken itself. It was the repeated reheating cycle, the compounding oxidation load his body was managing every single week, year after year. He made one change. He still makes his Sunday chicken, but now he eats it fresh that day and refrigerates any extra to eat cold the following day, not reheated. I did not think cold chicken would bother me, he told me. Turns out, it doesn't. The practical rules here are specific. If you choose to eat fried foods, eat them once, fresh, immediately after cooking. Do not reheat fried foods in a microwave at high power. If you must reheat, use a low oven temperature that warms evenly rather than scorching the surface. Never reheat fried food more than once. And never reuse old frying oil. Discard it after one use. The food is not the enemy. The repetition of reheating it is. Let me bring this together because I want you leaving this video with a clear, specific picture. Not anxiety, information. 3 foods, 3 distinct mechanisms, 1 unifying principle. Reheated processed meats carry a pre-existing load of nitrosamines from the curing and preservation process, and every additional heat exposure accelerates the formation of more. The IARC classifies these compounds as probable human carcinogens with specific links to pancreatic cancer. Reheated chicken generates a compounding load of heterocyclic amines, genotoxic compounds associated with direct DNA damage, with each additional heat cycle building on the last. Research from the National Cancer Institute connects high HCA exposure specifically to increased pancreatic cancer risk in adults over 60. Reheated fried foods continue an oxidation process that began in the first fry, producing a compounding load of aldehydes, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and acrylamide with every additional round of heat. Compounds the IARC classifies as probable human carcinogens, studied specifically for their association with gastrointestinal cancer risk. None of this requires you to change your entire diet. None of this requires you to stop eating foods you enjoy. It requires 3 specific habit changes. Never reheat processed meats at high temperature. Eat them once, freshly cooked. Eat leftover chicken cold. If you must warm it, use low heat once only. Eat fried foods fresh. If you have leftovers, eat them cold. Never reheat them. That is the practical summary. 3 changes, applied consistently to your weekly kitchen habits. They meaningfully reduce your exposure to the specific class of compounds that cancer researchers connect to the malignancies with the lowest survival rates in medicine. Now tell me something in the comments. Which of these 3 foods surprised you the most? Because the answers I consistently hear from viewers tell me exactly where the gaps in public health education are largest. And those gaps shape every video I make after this one. Your comment is not small. It matters more than you know. If what you heard today will genuinely change something in your kitchen this week, share this video. Not for this channel. For the person in your life who reheats their leftover sausage every morning, their chicken every Tuesday, their leftover fries, onion rings, fried fish, or fried chicken the next day, and has never once been told why that habit deserves a second thought. That share may be the most useful thing you do for their health today. Subscribe if you have not already. Every week, I bring you the research that actually applies to the body you are living in at this stage of your life. No products, no sponsorships, no noise, just the science, the way I explain it to my own patients. Next time, we are going to cover the 5 breakfast foods that are routinely marketed as heart-healthy after 60, and that the research increasingly shows are doing something very different to your blood sugar and your arteries. That is a conversation you will not want to miss. One final and important thing. Everything I have shared today is based on published biochemistry, peer-reviewed food science research, and the documented assessments of international cancer research organizations. This is educational information. It is not personal medical advice for your specific situation. Cancer is a complex disease. Individual risk depends on many factors I do not know about you. If you have concerns about your cancer risk or your diet, please have that conversation with your own physician, the one who knows your history, your family background, and your full picture. I am Dr. Thomas Ellison. Protect your health with the information your kitchen never came with.